Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. I'm so glad you're here today because we're going to get into a really fascinating modern-day story. It actually takes a timeless piece of wisdom and drops it right into the middle of the everyday modern workplace. You know, if you've ever found yourself wondering about the true impact of your daily habits or how the work you do today actually ripples out into the future, well, you are definitely in the right place. We're going to break down this incredible case study about two professionals, their totally distinct approaches to problem solving, and the completely different legacies they ended up leaving behind.
Okay, let's dive straight into this. Are you planting trees you'll never sit under? Now, this is an ancient concept. It's deeply rooted in the classic Indian fables of the Panchatantra. And the idea is pretty simple, but it's super profound. True greatness is about putting effort into something that's going to provide shade or benefit long after you're gone. It's a gorgeous metaphor, right? But how does it actually apply to our fast-paced, deadline-driven jobs today? Like, how exactly does planting trees translate to answering emails, writing code, or managing complex projects? Well, to figure that out, we're going to look at a real-world application of this exact philosophy. So, let's set the stage. Imagine a leading software company. Let's call them CYZ Technologies. They're expanding, and they make two critical hires on the exact same day. They bring on two senior engineers, Karan and Mira. Now, on paper, these two are practically identical. They both have these stellar resumes, they're equally skilled, and they're both immediately tasked with tackling complex, high-stakes projects. But the second they sit down at their desk to actually do the work, it becomes incredibly clear that their mindsets and their daily working styles could not be more opposite.
Now, what's really interesting here is the stark, literal night and day contrast between how they operate on a daily basis. Let's look at Karan's approach first. Karan is this rapid-fire problem solver, but he writes almost no documentation. His variable names are super confusing, and all of the really essential processes exist entirely inside his own head. He gets the task done, sure, but in a total silo. But then look at Mira. Mira is building an ecosystem. She writes crystal clear, easy-to-read documentation. She records these short, handy guides for her workflows. She actively takes the time to automate repetitive tasks, and she even leaves detailed notes exactly why she made certain decisions. She is literally future-proofing her work.
So, you might be wondering, why on earth does Karan work this way? Well, his justification is entirely rooted in the short term. He says, I may not even be on this project next year, why should I spend extra time making it easier for someone else? And honestly, in a lot of corporate cultures today, that mindset is pretty common. Karan is focused exclusively on finishing today's task. And yeah, he solves problems really quickly, which probably looks fantastic on a weekly status report. But his solutions are essentially a black box. They are entirely dependent on him and him alone. Basically, if Karan isn't in the room, Karan's work just cannot be understood.
Mira, on the other hand, is operating from a totally different paradigm. Whenever she solves a problem, she doesn't just think about checking a box. She literally imagines a brand new person joining the team 6 months down the line. Get this, some of her teammates actually teased her for this. They told her she was doing all this extra work nobody asked for, wasting time on details that didn't matter for the immediate deadline. But she just smiled and said, I'm helping someone I may never meet. She is the architect, actually out there planting that proverbial tree.
Let's track how this all plays out, because it's fascinating to see how it builds over time. This timeline perfectly maps out the delayed consequences of both their actions. Day one, they're both hired. They put their heads down, work in their respective styles. Then we hit the 1-year mark. A full year passes. Karan ends up accepting a higher-paying job at another company and leaves CVZ entirely. Around the exact same time, Mira gets promoted and pivoted to a completely different internal project. So both of these original projects are now left without their creators. And the true test of their work isn't what happened on day one, but what happens weeks and months later when the dust finally settles and new people have to step in to take over.
Well, the results for Karan's project were, frankly, disastrous. Within weeks of Karan leaving, his old project just began falling apart. Because the processes only existed in his head, literally no one could understand his code. Those confusing variables became massive roadblocks. Stuff that should have been simple, routine changes, they were taking days for the remaining engineers to figure out. Ultimately, the company was forced to just rebuild large parts of the system completely from scratch. So all that time Karan thought he had saved by rushing and skipping the documentation ended up costing the company massive amounts of time, money, and resources.
Now, the crucial point is what happens over on Mira's old team. Remember, she moved on too, but her legacy unfolds in a dramatically different way. First, a brand new graduate joins her previous team. On his very first day, instead of hitting a brick wall, he discovers her guides and her crystal clear documentation. Whenever he has a question, the answer is literally already written down waiting for him. Next, he runs those automation scripts Mira took the extra time to build, and he's completing what used to be hours of manual work in mere minutes, which means this brand new graduate becomes fully productive within weeks rather than taking months to ramp up.
And this brings us to just a really profound realization. One afternoon, while breezing through a complex task thanks to all those systems left behind, the new graduate says this: "I've never met Mira, but it feels like she's still helping me." I really want you to let that sink in for a second. Mira's foresight, her willingness to just do the unglamorous, unasked-for work of documentation and system building, essentially cloned her expertise. She wasn't even in the room. She had never even met this young engineer, yet she was actively mentoring him and ensuring his success.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core difference when the CEO finally reviews the true impact of these former employees months later. When you just measure raw output, sure, Karan completed tasks quickly, but his long-term value, it was a net negative. His fast deadlines were completely forgotten, replaced only by the painful memory of costly rebuilds. Mira, on the other hand, built lasting systems. Her long-term value was exponential. Her tools kept growing in value because they actively made everyone around her better, faster, and more efficient long after she had moved on to her next big challenge.
The data was actually so striking that the CEO addressed the entire company just to summarize the ultimate difference between these two types of workers. The CEO delivered this incredible message: success isn't measured only by what you finish. It's also measured by what continues to help others after you've moved on. I mean, what a quote. It's a complete paradigm shift away from that hyper-individualistic hustle culture we see so often. It redefines a high performer not as the person who just sprints across the finish line alone, but as the person who paves the road so the rest of the team can follow effortlessly.
This connects perfectly back to our source material and that timeless Panchatantra metaphor we started with. Years later at CYZ Technologies, people barely even remembered Karan's supposedly impressive deadlines, but they were absolutely still using Mira's tools, her guides, and her ideas. Because great people don't just solve today's problems, right? They leave tomorrow just a little easier for everyone else. They are the foresighted architects of their workplace. They plant the trees, knowing full well that they are cultivating an environment of success for future generations of workers.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought to close out our explainer today. I want you to look at your own habits, look at your own daily workflows, and really ask yourself, what kind of tomorrow are you leaving behind? Are you rushing through just to get the job done for today? Or are you building systems, writing that extra guide, and leaving notes for someone you may never even meet? I challenge you to be a little more like Mira this week. Go plant a tree. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you next time.